At our academy, we say that golf is technical, physical, and mental. And martial arts was the exact same thing for me. It was technical, it was physical, and it was mental. And a lot of people may not see those similarities if they haven't done both. But in fact, I had a conversation a few weeks ago with a world champion boxer who now plays golf. And she iterated the exact same idea, which is you're absolutely right. Now that I've retired from boxing, golf has replaced it because it tends to check all the same boxes that we were looking for. And also the functional aspect of martial arts, which is it's a very full body experience, it's a very mental experience, and that's going to translate into golf in so many good ways.
Welcome to The Golf Parent, where you get access to the best minds in junior golf. I'm your host, Ryan Adams, and today's episode is unlike any other that we've ever done before, because my guest isn't just a golf coach. He's a former Muay Thai and MMA coach who's bringing a warrior's mindset into junior golf. Patrick Sebastian has spent years training top fighters, athletes who have to stay calm under pressure, manage fear, control their breath, and perform when everything in their body wants to react. And now he's applying those same principles to golf. We talk about flow state and why it's not random, it's actually trainable. We talk about breathing techniques that can literally change how your child responds after a bad shot. We talk about meditation, creating space between the emotion and the reaction. And we dig into why maybe we shouldn't just be training golfers, we should actually be training complete athletes. But before we dive into the episode, if you haven't yet, head over to thegolfparent.com and become a Golf Parent Insider. It's free to join, and you'll get exclusive content, behind-the-scenes access, special perks, and partner discounts. And now, without further ado, let's get into the conversation. Patrick Sebastian on the Golf Parent Podcast. Welcome, Patrick. Thanks so much for being here.
Thank you for having me. I'm really excited about this conversation.
So I am too, because I've had a lot of conversations with, golf pros, golf coaches, more traditional, mindset coaches. I mean, everything has been very, very golf centric, but you come at this from a slightly different angle because your background's not necessarily in golf. Your background's in martial arts, Muay Thai, fighting, and helping fighters become champions. Am I understanding that correct?
Yes, I worked as a Muay Thai coach and MMA coach for several years, and now I've transitioned into golf, despite, yes, like you said, the pretty unique background.
So where does that overlap? So how does a background understanding martial arts and everything that goes into that, I guess my first question to you would be, would you suggest that all the golf parents out there put their kids in some form of martial art training to augment in addition to the other sports that they're in?
That's an interesting question. 100%. 100%. And the reason is, and we can get into this, is one, I think that it builds confidence in a way that very few things do. And confidence is going to translate in all aspects of life, whether it's on the golf course, school, or anything else that these kids want to do with their lives. It teaches discipline, right? And having discipline in your golf game is extremely important, not only in the way that you play, but in the way that you practice. Another thing the reason that I transitioned from martial arts into golf was when my body, after, many, many years of abusing my body, I guess, if you would, from too much fight training, there came a time where I knew that was going to have to stop, but I needed something to replace it. And I needed to scratch that itch, and I needed to check certain boxes. And at our academy, our golf academy, we say that golf is technical, physical, and mental. And martial arts was the exact same thing for me. It was technical, it was physical, and it was mental. So I was able to replace that with golf. And a lot of people may not see those similarities if they haven't done both. But in fact, I had a conversation a few weeks ago with a world champion boxer who now plays golf. And she iterated the exact same idea, which is you're absolutely right. Now that I've retired from boxing, golf has replaced it because it tends to check all the same boxes that we were looking for. So absolutely, I think it's an amazing way to get your kids, and also the functional aspect of martial arts, which is it's a very full body experience, it's a very mental experience, and that's going to translate into golf in so many good ways.
So you've got a background in Muay Thai, but
Muay Thai, yeah.
This may be Muay Thai, Muay Thai.
Muay Thai.
How am I saying that wrong?
Muay Thai. Yeah.
Muay Thai. Oh,
yeah.
The Canadian Albertan in me is coming out with the the twangy. Are you? This may be a difficult question to answer, but if you had to pick maybe your top 3 different martial arts to put a kid into that directly would translate to golf, what would those be?
Yeah. I think Muay Thai, yes, as long as it's done properly. I'm not a huge fan of kids fighting or kids sparring or risking severe
Sure.
injury. I mean, fighting it's a tough sport. So as long as it's done
Yeah.
properly and taught properly, the reason Muay Thai I think is so good for golf is because of the physical aspects of the techniques, right? So when I teach someone how to punch or how to kick, we're using ground forces, we're using lag, we're using combinations of legs and core and upper body, we're teaching how to generate power efficiently. And all of those things are the exact same things we're trying to learn for the golf swing. And one of the reasons that I've progressed relatively quickly in golf, I believe, is because I had that solid martial arts background and was able to apply many of those principles to learning the golf swing. In fact, sometimes I'll look at the golf swing from a different perspective than most golf coaches because I just see it from the perspective of martial arts and movement instead of getting caught up in all of the golf terminology or the golf concepts that they've been learning for 20 years. And so that I would think yes. Um, as a parent and as someone who believes that martial arts can also help for self-defense, it can help for kids that might struggle with bullying or any of those things. Another martial art that I think is extremely valuable is Brazilian jiu-jitsu. So Brazilian jiu-jitsu is kind of like the opposite of Muay Thai. It's ground-based, it's non-contact, so no one's getting hit. And again, that's less of a technical, there's less technical overlap with golf, but I think it just teaches so many beautiful values, and it teaches discipline and the importance of training and the importance of just applying yourself and learning something that you're going to be able to use no matter also how big you are, small you are. It's great for girls, it's great for women. And I have a lot of friends that are jujitsu instructors and black belts. So obviously I have a huge fondness for that sport as well. And then I think those are the main two. I think you can do boxing or kickboxing or Muay Thai. They're all more or less the same as far as the basic techniques. But I think those two kind of opposites of each other, but I think they complement each other really nicely.
I have this theory floating around my head for the last couple of years that with my own son, that if I was to teach him like Tai Chi or Qigong or something where it's very like, in my mind, I'm like, is it possible to become a Jedi? Is there something there that that the chi or the energy and understanding if there's a manipulation of that, and then how to like put that into the golf ball at some point? Am I completely like out to lunch here to think that
No,
that
you're
might
so
be
on to
possible?
something that, okay, I didn't know we were going to go in this direction, but let's go. So Tai Chi, Qigong, I think are beautiful forms. However, for kids, you're going to have a really hard time because they move very slowly. It's very
Mm.
internal. And I think you're going to have a hard time getting your kid excited about that form of movement or martial art. However, what you're tapping into is actually a formula that I've developed over several years, which is this concept of using combinations of martial arts training and breath training and meditation to get kids or to get people into a flow state, to get people to tap into this heightened state, this pre-performance state, which, you said Jedi, which is it's kind of how it feels when you're in that state. And a lot of this is based on science. It's something I stumbled into during my fight training days. I basically went for a run on Mount Royal. If you know Montreal, Mount Royal is like our central park. It's this beautiful park in the center of the city, and it has a small mountain at the center of it that you can run. There's trails all over the place, beautiful spots to run up to, lookout points. And so I would run these trails all the time. And then about 6 months into a meditation practice, I decided to run up the mountain. And when I got to the top, I sat down to meditate for 20 minutes while recovering from this run. And that was when I, for the first time, unlocked this heightened state of consciousness, this peak performance state. And I knew that I tapped into something. It was like I hacked meditation, because though meditation had been beneficial and I really enjoyed my experiences with it, up till that moment, I never had that wow moment that you'll read about. I'd read about Zen Buddhism and I'd read about all of these different practices. And up until that moment, I never really lived it until then. And then I was able to repeat that formula over and over again. And it made a massive difference in my fight training. I suddenly start seeing incredible results in the ring or in the cage when I was sparring with some of the fighters that I was training. I was able to pass that knowledge on to some of the fighters that I was working with, and they started getting really great results. And it's something that I also bring into golf now. The main difference being that in golf, we don't train the same way that we do in fight training because it does require a certain amount of intensity, right? You need to be able to bring some intensity to your training. There has to be a level of adversity for the flow state to kick in, right? Flow is kind of like this emergency system that we have built in. So in those moments of struggle or challenge or adversity, we have this next gear that we can lock into, but there needs to be a trigger. And sometimes the mental aspect of stress isn't enough. Sometimes there has to be a physical stress in order to facilitate that trigger. But that's where the breathing and meditation come in, because they help us to kind of regulate that physical challenge and help drive it into a positive direction and trigger that flow state or peak performance state. In golf terminology, get in the zone, if that makes sense.
It does, and what you're I've never thought of it that way. Now, I've dabbled with many different meditation practices for years now, and I know when you're sitting down and when you're doing different forms of breathing, different states, what will happen? You'll start to vibrate, you'll start to, even oscillate, and you'll get the goosebumps, you'll get that energy. But I never thought about flow being that in action. And it seems like there needs to be, like, when you're in that heightened state of consciousness, and if you're just sitting and you're just meditating, that's great. But what happens if you need to channel that in some sort of action direction, which is what we've been all, I guess, labeling as flow? Am I understanding that correct? Where it's almost like that heightened state of consciousness, but in action.
Yes, absolutely. And so if we want to get into the science of it, and this is something I've been studying for probably about 10 years now, there's when you study flow states, something they talk about is something called a state of hypofrontality. So hypo meaning less of, and frontality is referring to the prefrontal cortex. So the prefrontal cortex is that big chunk of brain we have right in the middle here that is responsible for our higher cognitive functions. In other words, thinking. Whenever we're thinking, our prefrontal cortex is hyperactive. Now, when you get into a flow state, that part of the brain actually shuts off temporarily while you're in that flow state, which means what? We're running on instinct. We're running on the other parts of the brain that aren't involved in thinking and processing all of that information. And so that to me is kind of like, and this is why we can get in trouble on the golf course when we're overthinking, because we're too focused on everything that's going on. We're thinking too much. Or another term is time traveling, right? We're focusing on the past or future, but we're not present in the moment. And that's going to get us in trouble on the golf course. Now, where else can you create that state of hypofrontality? With meditation. So when you get into a deep meditative state, you also deactivate that prefrontal cortex, which is why you stop thinking, right? And that's the struggle when a lot of people introduce meditation into their lives. They struggle to stop thinking because they think that is the goal of meditation. In many ways it is. And it's a difficult state to achieve, but there are ways to kind of hack it. And that's where I highly recommend go for a run, do a workout, do something physical before you sit to meditate, because you're going to create this neurochemical reaction through your movement practice that's going to facilitate achieving that hypofrontality state or that deep meditative state, because it's like you're 50% of the way there instead of starting at 0%. And so, yeah, absolutely. I think a flow state and a deep meditative state are more or less the same at the biological level or the neurological level. The difference is a flow state is more action based, as where a meditative state is more still and sitting. And yeah, that's basically I'd say the difference between the two, but there's definitely tons of overlap, and we can almost consider them the same basic neurological state.
I'm thinking about every classic kind of martial art movie where the sensei is like, less mind, too much mind.
Yeah.
Basically, is get out of that prefrontal cortex part of your brain and allow that like instinct or that athlete or whatever it is to kind of take over. I'm also thinking about your kind of system to kind of hack the flow state. I remember looking into what yoga originally was for, and it seemed like yoga, like the actual practice of yoga, the yoga that what we think of as yoga, like Bikram's yoga or flow yoga or whatever it might be, was actually used as a way to get the body ready to meditate. So it sounds like you're definitely stumbling onto something that, for tens of thousands of years has been known, which is you activate the body first to then quiet the mind so that then you can get into those deeper, higher levels of consciousness. And I thought that was interesting that's actually the point of yoga. It's not to go, sweat and then have a cup of tea and then, wear Lululemon. It's actually to then meditate after, which I think a lot of us forget to do.
Yeah, 100%. And I think yoga, again, like you said, originally, in fact, yoga, the original yoga was without movement. It was purely about the breathing and unlocking the consciousness. And then, like you said, they would use different movement techniques to help facilitate the breath and facilitate that meditation. And then, as you said, it turned into something very different now. And I love yoga and I think it's extremely important. I think that it's actually an important part of golf training because it does help with mobility and flexibility. and focus and the ability to slow things down. But exactly, I think that, and the same thing with martial arts. If you go back far enough, meditation, even Muay Thai, which has deep, deep roots in Buddhism because of the fact that it's from Thailand. There's so much overlap between Buddhist practices and Muay Thai, traditional Muay Thai practices. And that's kind of where my interest in meditation was peaked in the beginning. So there's definitely, go back far enough, and they kind of understood back then what we now understand, despite that they didn't have the science that we have today. So I think there's something there that the traditional ways are definitely just as powerful today as they were back then.
We've been touching on breathing a little bit here, and I'm kind of curious, sticking to a golf focus, what can we do pre-round, pre-shot, post-shot, walking through the fairway? Is there one kind of way to breathe, a box breathing, a certain type that would kind of work, a Swiss Army knife? Hey, golf parents, quick pause here. If you're enjoying this conversation and getting value from it, do me a quick favor. Hit that follow or subscribe button wherever you're listening. It helps us reach more parents who are on the same journey as you, raising the next generation of great golfers. All right, that's it. And now, back to the show. Breathing technique that would work on the golf course? Is there different ways to do it?
Let's keep the Swiss Army knife analogy, but let's add a few tools to that Swiss Army knife. So I teach 3 different techniques, and they're very closely related. And the reason I teach 3 is because I think we need different types of breathing for different situations. So the first type of breathing that I love to teach, and this is kind of the foundation of the breathing practice, which is diaphragmatic breathing. So diaphragmatic breathing, meaning that we're trying to maximize the engagement of the diaphragm and expand the rib cage as far as we can, right? Just to get that nice, long, deep breath. And this is also training your breathing system. When you look at most people, they tend to breathe very shallow, right? They tend to breathe in the chest, but they never let that breath go deep into the abdominal cavity. And so when that happens, you're not going to get the most out of each breath. So the first thing I teach is diaphragmatic breathing. You're not practicing that on the golf course necessarily. This is something you might do at home. You sit, and I have a whole video series, by the way, on this, if people want to check that out, where you're basically placing one hand on your stomach, one hand on your chest, and you're using that as a guide. Okay, so that's diaphragmatic breathing. That's the first technique that I teach. It's kind of the beginning, the basic. The second one is what we call the physiological sigh. So this was made very popular by Andrew Huberman and the Huberman podcast. And they did a bunch of research on different breathing techniques and figured out that the physiological sigh was something that we already do naturally to activate the parasympathetic nervous system. So the physiological sigh is the best technique if you're trying to calm down your nervous system, which obviously on the golf course is going to happen very often. So in those moments of high pressure, in those moments of stress, in those moments where you feel like things are speeding up and you want to slow things down, the physiological sigh is a great technique. This is a long, deep inhale through the nose, a second short inhale through the nose, and then a very slow exhale through the mouth. So that's going to be the physiological sigh. And I would say almost 80% of the time on the golf course, that's the one that we're looking for. But then there's a third technique that I can...
Sorry, just Patrick.
Of course.
The sigh also implies that there needs to be an audible sound to it, like a... or does it...
Sort of. I don't think it matters. So what I teach is you want to keep your mouth half closed and just kind of slowly filter the air through your mouth. The problem with the sigh, if you make too much noise, and there are benefits to that, but asking, especially for junior golf, anything that's going to draw attention to kids, they're not going to do it, right? And they're like, people are going to think I'm weird. And that's something you have to compete with, even with, they golfers who didn't want to do certain things. They got a camera above them listening, they have a camera. Yeah. What are people going to think? What are their, I'm doing this weird breathing thing. I'm like, all right, well, keep struggling and, get back to me when you're willing to try something. But no, you don't need the audible sigh, although I think there might be a benefit to that. And then the third technique is something I call activation breathing. So quick breathing science is that when you inhale, your heart rate goes up. And when you exhale, your heart rate slows down. Your heart rate activates your sympathetic system. Your exhale activates your parasympathetic. So they're in balance. So if I'm stressed, nervous, under pressure, what happens? My heart rate goes up. So what I want to do is I need a breathing technique to slow things down. But there's moments on the golf course where, and if you've, been a parent at a junior golf tournament, things can move pretty slowly sometimes. So you show up to a par 3, there's already a group on the tee box in front of you. There's another group on the green. So you're in for a wait. So 10 minutes goes by, your junior golfer is talking with their friends or just sitting there because they don't know the people they're playing with. And then 10 minutes later, it's like, hey, it's your turn to hit. So now you've lost focus. Maybe you're tired. Maybe you've lost energy. So now you need a breathing technique to get you back up, to give you that focus, to give you that energy. So activation breathing is a long inhale to get the heart rate up, and then a very quick exhale to keep it up. So it'd be like, you do a couple of those, and all of a sudden, you're going to feel your heart rate go up. You're going to feel your focus increase. And now you're ready to hit your shot because you're able to bring your energy back. And in some cases, I'll combine the two, right? I'll do the activation breathing to get my energy up. And then I'll do one physiological side to focus that energy. And then I'm ready to hit because I'm super focused, calm, focused, and ready to perform. The other time I would use activation breathing, 15th, 16th hole, long day. It's hot outside. You're walking. You're tired. Your legs are tired. Your body's tired, but you have to hit that shot, right? Golf course doesn't care how tired you are. You have to hit that shot. So a couple activation breaths can be a great way to fire things up, to get that energy back. I'll even tell people like jump up and down a bit, move your legs, move your arms, be an athlete. Remember that there's always ways to shake it out. Same thing if you watch boxing, you watch fighting, they're in the corner of the ring and they're jumping up and down. Watch a tennis player who's getting ready. They're moving, right? They're always in movement because as soon as you stand still, two things happen. Your body starts to get tired, and two is tension starts to build up. And we don't want that tension to build up. We want that body to flow. We want that body to be nice and smooth and able to perform. So these this combination of breathing techniques, if used properly, become these really powerful tools that we can use depending on the different situations.
Those are fantastic tools. Going back to the swing for a second, are you a fan of a little bit of movement in like as you're getting ready for the swing? I mean, it seems like there's some players that have a little bit of movement. They're like, they're moving around a little bit, trying to find that kind of sweet spot. And then there's other players that just kind of like lock in and don't move at all. And then all of a sudden there's one explosive move. What's your
I
research or
think,
your
again, swing
thoughts?
your swing. But what I've noticed is players who stand over the ball for too long tend to get into trouble
Mm,
because the
almost
body
always.
is going, because usually if you're standing over the ball for too long, two things are happening. One, you're thinking about something. There's no way you're standing there for 10, 15 seconds without thinking about something, right? Because unless you're like the Zen monk, there's no way that that's happening. So usually when I watch a young player, especially, and they're standing there, I can see them thinking. I can see them, trying to not do the things that could get them in trouble. The second thing is the tension in your body is going to rise, right? The longer you stay there stiff without moving, well, that tension is going to rise up. And the more tension you have in the body, the less your muscles are going to perform the way you want them to. So, yes, 100%. I think a little bit of even just what we call micro movements. So, just a little bit of like regripping the club, moving your weight from foot to foot, keeping a little bit of like a circular motion in the shoulders, anything that keeps the tension from building up. And while you're doing that, it's also a great way to get out of your mind and into your body. Because if you start feeling your body, if you start thinking about the different things that you're moving, well, you're not thinking, you're just focusing on the body. So this is where that body mind connection, I believe, is so important. The best way to get out of your mind when you have all of this negative stuff happening is to get into the body and to use the body as a way to refocus the mind, whether it be through movement, through breathing, or a combination of the two.
I'm going to throw another curveball at you here, but talking about the body mechanics and getting ready before the shot. I remember a decade plus ago, there was this video that surfaced on my YouTube feed. And it was of this camera crew that went, I believe, in the 70s down to Thailand. And there was this one particular healer there that was able to heal certain ailments by conjuring up electricity through basically for lack of a better word, the the butt and the navel. And he was able to create a
Okay.
charge between those two, and he was able to literally have electricity and chi energy come through his hands, which he would then use to heal. And they took him up to the roof, and they're like, okay, well, how much can this go? And he, on camera, took a bunch of paper, rolled it up, and he was able to use this and make it go into fire. Like literally lit the newspaper on fire. Now this could be this was well before AI or fake news or all the rest of this. I don't know. Maybe it was fake, maybe it wasn't, but that's intrigued me ever since I saw it to be like, wait a second. Is there some sort of activation that we can do? Is there a part of our body? And I'm assuming for the martial art background, you might know a little bit about this to be able to create that extra power that some of the greatest masters tap into, even though they could be small in frame. That's where they get that energy and that power from.
Yeah.
Am I crazy?
Look, there's a lot of, no, I don't think you're crazy. I do think we have to be careful. Like there's a lot of videos out there of these chi masters who are able to throw their students without touching them. And those are usually disproved pretty quickly. Some of those guys have gone up against, some of those have gone up against real fighters and they get disproved very quickly, unfortunately. However, I do believe in energy. I do believe that we are energetic beings. Our nervous system runs on electricity, right? And so if you're able to, I guess, create a smoother flow from the mind to the body, if your nervous system is running as efficiently as possible, that to me is where you're maximizing the energy or the chi. I mean, chi really is just a word for energy. And if you're able to let that energy flow through you, if you're able to live in the moment, because what disrupts flow? And I think of flow as chi in a way, right? Like when I'm in a flow state, I'm not thinking about the science. I'm just feeling incredible. I feel connected. I feel strong. I feel when it happens on the golf course, I feel like I'm almost part of that golf course. It's such a powerful feeling. And I've had experiences. I've had this experience in the jungles of Costa Rica. I've had the experience all over the place. And the golf course is an interesting place because there is a nature connection. There's a connection to nature. And I think that's a great way to harness chi because it is part of that kind of primal natural energy that we're all a part of. But what disrupts that flow is negative thinking, is overthinking, living in the past, living in the future, over-focused on the technical aspects of the game. I think it's important to focus on technique, but once you're on the golf course, it's kind of time to let that go and to just be in the moment, be present, and really just make sure that you're using what you have to the best of your abilities instead of focusing on what you're not doing well or what you could be doing instead. Does that make sense?
It does, yeah. So with the golf training and the martial art, there's no special activation, if you will, other than maybe the micro movements, the breathing. Is there anything else that you've discovered where, like, I'm going back to the Jedi analogy. I'm trying to figure out how to harness the Force, and I'm like, there's got to be something there that we haven't figured out yet, where it's like that.
Oh boy.
I mean, you see it.
And look, this is where, I wish I had 10 years of golf experience as a player for the simple reason that I've experienced this in martial arts. So when I discovered that I could combine training and meditation to tap into these flow states, I started applying it to my fighting and my fight training. And I actually got to a point where it didn't happen every single time, but there were moments when I was in the ring sparring with someone and everything slowed down. I was in the matrix. It was like that person was moving in slow motion. Everything felt extremely easy. Everything I wanted to do was working perfectly. I was in flow. I was in a perfect flow state. In the golf world, I would compare that to every putt is dropping. Every swing feels perfect. You're firing at pins. You're not missing. We may not see it as much in amateur golf, but if you look at the best players in the world, when they're shooting a 59, when they're playing and it just looks easy. And we know how hard golf is, but when they make it look so easy, that's not an accident. That is a combination of incredible skill, but also a certain mental state that allows them to play with 100% of their potential. And what happens for most people is we don't get access to our full potential. We get access to a limited amount of potential. Like I honestly believe that everybody who plays golf could never plays to their full potential. Everybody is so much better than they think they are, except for those best players in the world.
Is we all think 100%. So too. Everybody that plays golf 100%. Knows that, like, what went wrong when it didn't go right.
Yeah, but and I think, especially when we look at very talented players who will tell me, like, I know I'm better than this because I was able to play this incredible round when I went out with my friends. But then in tournament golf, I struggle because I can't handle the pressure, because I had the peer pressure, people watching me, all of the different reasons why tournament golf is so different than casual golf is because of the amount of pressure that you're placing on yourself. Now, that pressure can also be a superpower, because if you can learn to use that pressure as a flow trigger and harness it and live in it and use it, Well, that could be a huge performance booster. But getting to that point, and that's the Jedi training that you're talking about. And this is the training that I do with my athletes and that I'm looking to pursue, which is using that pressure as a trigger. But now you have to train yourself how to transform that into performance, right? And that's kind of the bounce back effect. Why do the best players in the world? Why are they the greatest in the world? Not because they're perfect, but because when things go wrong, they autocorrect and make up for it with an incredible performance on the next hole, right? They follow up a bogey with a birdie. They follow up a bad round with a great round. So that's why they're the Jedis of golf. It's not because they're perfect. It's because they're able to harness that struggle and turn it into power and turn it into a positive performance.
So, where does meditation and visualization in golf kind of intersect? I know when you think about meditation, we're always trying to think about quieting the brain, not thinking. But then there's almost this visualization where obviously there's benefits to visualizing yourself being in that flow state, being successful, draining all the putts, hoisting the trophy. Is there anything in your experience where you get yourself into a deep meditative state and then you trigger visualization to play better, to fight better, to whatever it might be?
Yeah, 100%. And meditation, I think, is such a huge word in the sense that it can mean so many different things and it can be used in so many different ways. Like when I teach meditation, I teach different forms of meditation for different situations. Like achieving that perfect state of mindfulness is probably the hardest version of meditation, which is completely being able to just not think, right? And that's where you're going to have this kind of moment where everything just clicks and the thoughts just go away. You don't will them away, they just go away. And that is neurochemical, it's energetic. The exact moment or the exact trigger is often hard to describe, but it can happen. But you don't need to do that in order to gain the benefits from meditation. So when I talk about visualization training, this is more about being very present, being very in the moment, but using your creativity, kind of tapping into that creative mind and seeing yourself on the golf course and seeing yourself perform the way that you know you can when you're playing at your full potential. So it's a way to kind of boost your confidence and to give yourself that sense of, I'm in control, I am capable, I am strong, I am focused. So if I stand on that tee box, and I give a really good example, which is that first tee shot, right? You know you have a tournament coming up. You know that you're going to be nervous. You know there's a lot of people that are going to be watching you. Close your eyes, focus on that first tee box. Hopefully it's a course you've played before, so you can actually visualize what you're about to see in front of you. And I swear most players, myself included, I've done this all the time, immediately feel those butterflies kick in. I can feel the butterflies. I can feel that almost my hands get sweaty. Like it's unbelievable how powerful the mind can be, that when we bring ourselves into those high pressure moments, we relive them as though we are there. But the beauty of that is now that I've lived it, I can now take control of it. So now I can also visualize myself slowing things down, taking a few deep breaths, getting control of that nervous energy, turning it into power, and then visualizing myself hitting that perfect drive right down the middle. And if I do that over and over and over again, by the time I get to my tournament and I get to that first tee box, there's a feeling of having done this before. Like, hey, I've done this before in my mind, but I still remember how it felt to get control of that energy and to perform. So that's one way that you can use meditation and visualization in a positive way to improve your performance. The other thing about meditation, and I think this is a bit of the harder sell when it comes to meditation, which is the breathing techniques we talked about before, you're going to get an immediate effect, right? Use the physiological sigh, you will calm down your nervous system right away. Use the activation breathing, you will wake yourself up right away. But the benefit of meditation is more long-term. It's kind of like going to the gym. If I go to the gym once, I don't walk out covered in muscles. It doesn't work that way. It takes a 3 to 6 month commitment before I start seeing actual results. Meditation is the same thing. It takes a consistent practice, 20 minutes at a time, 3 to 5 times a week, to start seeing the permanent effects it can have on the nervous system. But what happens is I think of it as kind of developing a buffer, right? Especially for junior golfers or golfers in general, but we are talking about junior golfers who have this very, very quick trigger when they get frustrated, right? They go from, I hit a bad shot. Next thing you know, I have a broken club in my hand and I have no idea why, because I was so upset. I was so frustrated. I just couldn't control it. But what if there was a buffer? What if there was a split second in between the bad shot and the reaction to the bad shot where you actually get to catch yourself before that horrible reaction happens. And that's what meditation can do for you, is over time, that buffer gets a little bit bigger and a little bit bigger. So all of a sudden you hit the bad shot. And instead of getting super angry and super frustrated, you're like, huh, that happened. Okay. Well, now I'm more under control and I'm able to prevent myself from escalating to the point of no return. And I can actually do something about it. And then you need other practices and other strategies to make sure that you're focusing on the next shot, that you're going into your pre-shot routine, that you're working on your post-shot routine. But that's the part that you can teach. The other part needs to be trained, because those triggers are very, very delicate. And you can't tell someone, hey, don't react that way. It doesn't work that way. It's neurochemical. It's physiological. It's these powerful chemicals that are driving into your system and forcing you to react a certain way. No one wants to be angry. Nobody wants to break their clubs. They're doing it because they can't take control of it. So we need to build in these control systems, and we can do that through a consistent meditation practice.
I think in this day and age right now, I don't think there's very many people out there that don't see the benefits of meditation. I think the struggle is, I remember hearing that, everybody should meditate unless you're too busy, or everybody should meditate for 5 minutes a day. Unless you're too busy, then you should meditate for an hour a day.
Yeah.
I don't know who to prescribe that to, or to give credit to, but and it makes sense. But going back to junior golfers here, how do we teach the 5 to 12-year-old, and I know that's a pretty large spread, but how do we start introducing mindfulness and meditation to our children on the golf course or outside the golf course? What's the best way to do that?
So interesting enough, years ago, before I was even in golf, my son was in grade 5, and I met with his teacher for a usual parent-teacher meeting. And I don't remember how, but the word meditation came up. And I said, oh, I happen to teach meditation. She's like, huh, would you be willing to come teach it to my class? I was like, well, hold on, let me ask my son's permission first. And he was okay with it. So I went to teach this class. Not sure how these kids are going to react. And I was trying to think of a way, like, okay, if I'm the dad who shows up and suddenly we're going to talk about meditation, am I going to be able to keep them interested? Probably not. They're like, oh, they're going to just act the way that 10-year-olds act. But what I did instead was I asked them a question. I said, hey guys, how many of you get stressed? All the hands went up. Really? Why? Oh, sports, tests, when my parents fight, this. Suddenly, all of these kids are sharing the things in their lives that make them stressed. I said, okay, what if I could teach you a tool so that you don't feel stress, or that you're able to take control of stress? How many of you would want to learn that? All the hands went up. Because we underestimate how much our kids are dealing with stress, are dealing with pressure, are dealing with anxiety. And when it was presented as a tool that would make them feel better in those circumstances, they were all interested. And I had an entire room of kids for 5 minutes with their eyes closed, synchronized breathing. And the teacher looked at me and she's like, I cannot believe this is happening right now. And then I gave her,
Please don't
I gave
leave.
her a very, but I gave her a very simple protocol. And I said, you see what I did today? This isn't hard, but the best way is when it becomes a collective effort. And I said, if you just repeat exactly what I did, you should start your day with these kids every day this way. And that's what they did. Every day before class started, they would close their eyes and breathe for 5 minutes. And then she's like, their grades went up, everything improved. Behavior, kids that used to get in trouble weren't getting in trouble anymore. And there's tons of research and tons of schools that have implemented meditation programs. And I don't want to get in on that. But with golf, I think what has to happen is it has to become way more mainstream. It has to be something that golf academies embrace. It has to be something that is not optional, right? In the same way that I'm going to force you to hit 50 putts, I'm also going to force you to breathe for 5 minutes, right? It has to become something, because kids will do what everyone else is doing. But it's hard for me to believe that we're going to get a whole bunch of kids who autonomously just sit alone at home focusing on meditation. Unless they're very wise and very mature for their age, usually it doesn't happen. So the easiest way to introduce it is to introduce it in camps, to introduce it in group training sessions. We run a summer camp. In the last couple of years, once a week, I would go in and teach them these breathing techniques. And it was always extremely well received. In fact, that same conversation, who lives stress on the golf course? Me. Please help me. I don't want to be stressed. Nobody likes stress. Nobody likes feeling stressed. And especially with young athletes, I think they live levels of stress that other kids don't, especially in golf. because the pressure in golf is unbelievably high, especially if these kids are competing and trying to get to that next level. Junior golfers trying to get to college golfers trying to go pro. They're all living this incredible amount of pressure, and it's so score focused and so compared to what the other kids around you are doing that if they don't have tools to deal with that, it feels to me like it's the kids that are naturally more predisposed to being calm and in control under pressure that get to succeed, when there might be some very talented golfers out there who simply don't have the right tools to take control of stress and take control of all that pressure, because they could also be performing at a high level if we just teach them how to do it.
And golf moms, golf dads listening and watching, let's also not underestimate the power of monkey see, monkey do. When
100%.
the kids are watching us parents handling stress using meditation and tools, well, then that just becomes the way to do it. And so it's, let's man in the mirror a little bit as well and make sure that we're also embodying that calm, cool, collected, and the tools that we want our kids to be embodying as well.
Yeah. And I think not just parents, but coaches. I'm trying
Mm.
to spread the word among golf coaches that even if you don't understand it, doesn't mean that you can't encourage it, doesn't mean that you can't see the benefits of it. And this isn't just, I think more and more with the apps that are coming out and so much of the science that is out now just reinforces the benefits of meditation. I would also argue like that same concept of monkey see, monkey do applies to physical training as well. If we
Mm.
want our young golfers to train as athletes and think as athletes, we need to give them examples of what being an athlete is, right? And so, again, coaches, parents, and this is true for everything, but if you want your kid to take their health seriously and take training seriously, they have to have an example of it somewhere, right? Whether it's, at home or whatever it is, we have to be giving people the example. We have to give these kids the example, or else why would they do it? So I think in all things, whether it's physical training, mental training, meditation, all of it, we just need to provide them with the examples that they need and then make sure that they see, if they see the other kids doing it, well, they're going to want to do it too. But if they don't have any examples of that around them, it's going to be really hard for them to believe in the benefits because sometimes it doesn't happen right away, right? A meditation practice can take some time. A physical training practice can take some time. So we need to give them the belief first so that they're willing to invest the time that it's going to take to start seeing the results that they're looking for.
We've talked about a lot of really, really good stuff in this conversation, Patrick, but what haven't we talked about yet that we should be for junior golfers?
I think for me, and this is like a transition that I've made recently, is what I just said, which is we need to start thinking and training these kids as athletes and not as golfers. And this was really driven home for me this season when we have this young 16-year-old hits the ball a mile, incredible player, but struggles with pressure, struggles with the ability to perform in tournaments. And I asked him at one point, we're having this conversation. I was like, do you consider yourself an athlete? He's like, no, I'm a golfer. I was like, well, why would you think that way? Because that's what my friends have always told me, right? He has friends who play football, basketball, hockey. He's like, they're athletes. I'm the golfer. And the main reason being, if you play football or hockey, at some point you're going to work out. At some point, you're doing sprints in practice. You're pushing yourself. You're facing physical adversity with the concept being the harder I push you in practice, the easier the game is going to be. But in golf, kids hit balls all day, but hitting balls is not going to, they're not going to reach that level of physical adversity that they're going to reach if they go to the gym. And if we push them the right way, it's not just showing up to the gym and doing a few exercises. It's teaching kids how to train and how to bring intensity into that training so we can train them on how to deal with adversity, right? In the fight world, it was train hard, fight easy. The harder my training is, the easier the fight is going to be. But in golf, I see the opposite. Kids are avoiding exercise. They're avoiding fitness. They're avoiding those training sessions because they just want to go and hit balls all day and then get on the golf course. But the greatest players, the best players in the world, they are athletes. They train as athletes. Even the kids coming out of college now, they're hitting the ball a mile. They look different. They're strong, athletic looking players. So we need to start now. We need to start at the junior golf level, treating them as athletes, training technique, and the physical and the mental at the same time so that by the time they become older junior golfers or even young adults, it's already part of their DNA, right? And I think we talked about this right before the podcast started, which is give me an athlete, I'll turn them into a golfer. But if that kid has played golf their whole lives, by the time they're 15, 16, their body is going to be so out of whack, and they're going to have missed so many important development windows when it comes to speed and power. It's probably too late for them, unfortunately. So we have to start thinking of golfers as athletes, training golfers as athletes. And that's a huge part of what I want to do as a performance coach.
That is one of the most eye-opening uh, aspects of basically this journey with the podcast and talking to so many amazing minds like yourself is understanding, one, that there's development windows. I had no idea about that. I didn't realize that, listen, you actually do have windows where you have to get it right. And two, it's understanding that, the thing that really does separate the best in the world from everybody else, it's the mental side. Everybody
Yeah.
at a certain level can hit the ball. They all have the right techniques, all the rest of that. But it's who can calm the nerves and who can handle the pressure. And some of the best advice that I heard was to have the kids to simulate that pressure of the first tee or any sort of tournament type pressure, is to do like 10 push-ups and then get up and then hit your tee shot, like raise your
Yeah.
heart rate to the point where it's going to be when you're nervous. And then to your point, it's a good way to train the athlete in them as well, is to get them to do sprints or whatever it is, then hit a shot. Don't just beat balls for 50 in a row. Do something athletic, then hit a shot. Would you agree with that, or is there anything that you would add to that when it comes
100%.
to how to train them?
We actually, at the club where I work this summer, we have the Top Tracer range set up. And so what I was doing is we would play a game where we would do a closest to the pin, and I gave them a window. And if they were outside that window, it was 1 push-up per yard away from the pin. So
Nice.
kid, first few shots, he does great. He's inside that window. Oh, pulled one. That's 15 yards. That's 15 push-ups. So now he does his 15 push-ups, except now, not only is he physically under tension and pressure, but the mental pressure is, if I screw up the next shot, that's more push-ups. So now I have to find a way to take control of this physical stress I just created while locking in and focusing my mind to be able to hit this next shot. But interestingly enough, with the breathing techniques that I teach them, they actually improve their performance after the push-ups, because they're using that physical activation to lock in and focus their minds, and they actually start hitting better shots instead of it going in the other direction. So I thought there was some really interesting things there. And this is where I want to take it. I think that separating technical training, physical training, and mental training is a huge mistake. I think all of these things should be happening in a golf environment. Obviously, going into a gym is important, but like my dream setup is having a gym where I walk out the door, I'm on a driving range, and then I can go to a meditation room all in the same space, so that we can really embrace this holistic approach to technical, physical, and mental training for golf. Because 100% agree with what you just said.
Well, we don't have that space created just yet, but I do believe that it will
Well, I
be
think some
in the
colleges
future.
do. Some colleges do.
Yeah,
It's getting there. I think it's getting there.
it's getting there, but I would love to visit yours specifically. Patrick, for those people listening right now that do want to get into your ecosystem, that want to learn your system on how to breathe and get into the zone, or even if they're in the Montreal area to kind of work directly with you, what's the best way for them to find you, reach out, all that good stuff?
On everything, I just changed my whole title of everything. It's Move, Breathe, Zone. So Instagram at Move Breathe Zone, YouTube at Move Breathe Zone, my website, movebreathezone.com. That actually drives you to our Academy website, but it's an easier URL to remember. So Move Breathe Zone everything, and that's how you can find me. And I do virtual coaching as well as in-person coaching for people that are in the Montreal area.
Move, breathe, zone. I love it. It's the equation. Move your body,
Yeah,
understand your breathing equals getting into
yep,
the zone. That's the equation.
100%. 100%.
Ah, Patrick, what a joy. Thanks for being so generous with sharing, your techniques and your insights. There's a lot of really good stuff here for parents and juniors that are listening to this. Is there anything else that you'd like? I mean, you've got the eyes in some cases and the ears of golf parents all over the world. What advice would you give those parents out there right now on how to help basically guide their junior golfers careers, the journey of golf, how to teach this stuff? What advice would you give to the parents?
I think a lot of stuff we just mentioned. One, let your kids be athletes. Let them also diversify. Like if it's golf, golf, golf all the time, at some point they're going to burn out. Like let them try other sports, let them try other things while coming back to golf, obviously. Train them as athletes, teach them to be athletes, allow them to be athletes, right? Encourage them to think as an athlete. Athlete isn't just what the physical does, it's also the mindset that you have. And also, I think the most important part, having gone to many, many junior tournaments this year, is know that the way your kids are reacting isn't voluntary. Whether they're internalizing the frustration or externalizing the frustration, they don't want to be frustrated. They don't want to feel the way they feel. They don't want to react the way they react. They don't have the tools to make a difference, right? So instead of taking that kid and sending them to the range to hit more balls, look into physical training, look into mental training, look into breathing and meditation techniques and different types of coaching that's going to help the human being become a better golfer, and the better golfer become a better human being. And that's the last thing I want to say. One of the reasons I focus on junior golf is because all the tools that I'm going to teach the kids, well, we're going to create better human beings later on. Like a kid who starts meditating now becomes an adult who meditates in the future. And we're going to start just creating a better world, and we can do that through golf.
So beautifully said. Patrick, thank you. This was a
thank you for asking so many amazing questions. It was great.
No, this was wonderful, and this is one of those rare podcasts I'm going to go back and I'm going to listen to a couple more times because there's just so much good stuff. And honestly, you've kind of motivated me to get back to my own meditation practices. My wife has told me it's the best that she's ever seen me. It's I was pretty dedicated, 5 a.m. every single day for about 6 months straight, and I saw huge gains. Then life happens. You get busy, you become a dad, you get stressed with work and day job and blah 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 blah. Need to meditate not 5 minutes now, and now it needs to be an hour because I am too busy. But thank you. Thank you for this.
You're very welcome. Absolutely.
Hey golf parents, before you go, I just want to say thank you for being here. If you found value in this episode, please follow the podcast, leave a short review, or share it with another golf parent who would love it. Every single one helps us grow this movement to raise future champions together. Thank you. See you next week.